The last thing I remember hearing before everything went black wasn't the siren of the ambulance. It wasn't my husband telling me he loved me. It was the sound of my mother-in-law laughing. She was laughing because she thought my dying breath was a performance. She thought my closing throat was a bad acting job. And the worst part, my husband, the man I had washed socks and cooked meals for over 40 years, just sat there and watched. Let me back up to how the night started. It was supposed to be a standard Sunday dinner at Jeffrey's parents' house. If you are a woman of my generation, you know exactly what that means. It means you put on your nice slacks, you fix your hair, and you prepare yourself to bite your tongue for 3 hours. I was 68 years old, but the moment I stepped into Martha's house, I felt like a child being scolded. Jeffrey drove us there in silence. He always gets tense before we see his mother. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Just try to get along with her today, Vicky, he said as we turned into the driveway. You know how she gets when you refuse her food. Just eat a little bit of everything. Don't make a scene. I looked out the window. I never try to make a scene, Jeffrey. I just don't want to end up in the emergency room. You know, my allergy is getting worse with age. He sighed, that heavy, impatient sigh that tells a wife she is being a burden. She knows about the peanuts. Vicky, she's not going to poison you. Just be pleasant. I wanted to believe him. I really did. When you have been married as long as I have, you want to believe that your partner has your back. You want to believe that his family is just eccentric, not malicious. But as I walked into that kitchen, the air felt heavy. Martha was at the stove, stirring a large pot of sauce. My sister-in-law, Brenda, was setting the table with that smirk she always wears when I'm around. The house smelled rich and savory, heavy with garlic and spices. Well, look who finally decided to show up, Martha said, not turning around. Dinner is ready. Sit down before it gets cold. We took our places. I sat next to Jeffrey, like I always do, looking for a little bit of comfort. He didn't look at me. He was busy pouring wine for his mother. Martha brought out the main dish. It was a chicken satay-style dish, covered in a thick brown sauce. My stomach dropped. It looked beautiful, but to me, it looked like a loaded gun. I have been allergic to peanuts since I was in my 30s, but over the last decade, it has become severe. Airborne isn't a problem, but ingestion? Ingestion could kill me. I tried to be polite. I really tried. I waited until everyone had served themselves. I cleared my throat gently. The table went quiet. Martha, I said, keeping my voice light and friendly. This smells wonderful. But I have to ask, does this sauce have peanuts in it? You know, I carry my EpiPen, but I'd really rather not have to use it tonight. The room went dead silent. Brenda rolled her eyes so hard I thought they would fall out of her head. Martha just smiled. It was that sweet, grandmotherly smile that hides a lot of cruelty. Oh, Vicky, Martha said, waving her hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. You always have to make dinner about you, don't you? It's my secret recipe. But it's safe. There are no nuts. It's mostly sunflower butter and spices. I looked at Jeffrey. He was already eating, shoveling the food into his mouth to avoid the conversation. He nudged me under the table with his knee. That was his signal. Eat the food. Stop causing trouble. Are you sure? I asked one last time. I really can't risk it, Martha. I cooked it myself, didn't I? Martha snapped, her smile dropping for a split second. Stop insulting my cooking and eat, or you're not welcome at this table. I didn't want to be the difficult wife. I didn't want to ruin Sunday dinner. So I trusted her. I trusted the grandmother of my children. I picked up my fork, cut a small piece of the chicken, and put it in my mouth. The first thing I tasted was the salt, then the garlic, and then, terrifyingly, the unmistakable, earthy taste of roasted peanuts. I froze. I tried to swallow, hoping I was wrong, hoping it was just my anxiety playing tricks on me. But the reaction was instant. It wasn't a slow build like it used to be. It was violent. My tongue felt like it had suddenly doubled in size. A metallic taste flooded my mouth. I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the china plate. Jeffrey, I wheezed. I reached for my water glass, but my hand was shaking so badly I knocked it over. Ice water spilled across the tablecloth, soaking into the expensive fabric. Oh, for heaven's sake, Vicky! Brenda yelled. Look what you did. I couldn't answer her. I stood up, clawing at my throat. It felt like someone had wrapped a thick wire around my windpipe and was pulling it tight. My chest felt heavy, like a concrete block had been placed on my lungs. I made a horrible, gasping sound, trying to suck in air that simply wouldn't come. I looked at Martha. I expected to see fear. I expected her to run to the phone. Instead, she started laughing. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a full belly laugh. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at her. I told you she was faking it. Brenda joined in. Oh my God, give her an Oscar. The clutching of the throat. That is classic drama queen behavior. I was dying. My brain was screaming that I was dying, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I fell to my knees, hitting the hardwood floor hard. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, tunneling down to a pinprick. We put peanuts in the dinner to prove you're a liar, Vicky. Martha crowed, looking delighted with herself. And look at you. You tasted one bite and decided to put on a show. You can stop now. We know the truth. I couldn't breathe. I was making high-pitched, wheezing noises. I fumbled for my purse, trying to unzip it, trying to get to my EpiPen, but my fingers were swollen and useless. I couldn't grip the zipper. I looked up at Jeffrey. He was the only one not laughing. He was sitting there, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, on the floor, turning red and gasping for life. Then he looked at his mother, who was cackling with joy. Jeffrey, I tried to say, but no sound came out. He didn't move. He didn't jump up to help me. He didn't grab the purse. He just looked frozen, terrified of ruining his mother's victory. He sat there, paralyzed by his own cowardice, while his wife suffocated on the carpet. The darkness started to close in. The room began to spin. The sound of their laughter sounded distorted, like it was coming from underwater. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not from the pain, but from the heartbreak. They really didn't care. They really thought this was funny. My body gave one last violent jerk, fighting for oxygen, and then my muscles went limp. I slumped forward onto the cold floor. The last thing I saw was Jeffrey's shoes. He still hadn't stood up. Then, finally, somewhere in the distance, I heard the wail of a siren. But it sounded so far away. The laughter was much closer. And then there was nothing. The first thing I felt was the tube in my throat. It was rough and scratching against the sensitive skin of my windpipe. Then came the steady, rhythmic beeping of a machine somewhere to my left. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were weighted down with lead. I was alive. That was the first realization. I hadn't died on Martha's dining room floor. But as I lay there, floating in that strange gray space between sleep and wakefulness, my mind didn't go to the peanut sauce. It didn't go to the laughter. Instead, it traveled back. It went back years, picking through the wreckage of my marriage like a detective looking for clues at a crime scene. You see, what happened at dinner wasn't an isolated incident. It wasn't a mistake. It was the finale of a show that had been running for 40 years. Lying there in that hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling tiles, I realized that I shouldn't have been surprised. They had been telling me who they were since the day I said, I do. I remembered the winter of 1998. It was a Tuesday. I slipped on a patch of black ice on our front porch while taking out the recycling. I heard the crack before I felt the pain. It was a sickening, dry snap that echoed in the cold air. I collapsed into the snow, gasping, clutching my ankle. Jeffrey was inside watching the game. I yelled for him, humiliated that I couldn't get up. He came to the door, not in a panic, but with a look of annoyance. He was holding a beer. "What now, Vicky?" he had asked, shivering in the doorway. "Get up, it's freezing out here." "I think I broke it," I cried, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Jeff, I can't put weight on it." He rolled his eyes. I saw it. Even through the pain, I saw him judge me. "You always think the worst," he said, coming down the steps reluctantly to help me up. "It's probably just a sprain. Walk it off. We have dinner reservations with the Millers in an hour. I'm not canceling because you slipped." And you know what I did? I stood up. I gritted my teeth until my jaw ached, and I limped into the house. I put on a pair of boots that were 2 sizes too big just to fit my swelling foot. I went to that dinner. I smiled. I drank white wine and made polite conversation while my foot throbbed with a pulse of its own. When I finally went to the doctor the next morning, because Jeffrey insisted we wait, the orthopedic surgeon looked at the x-ray and then at me. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "you have been walking on a shattered fibula for 12 hours. How are you not screaming?" I didn't have an answer for him then, but I do now. I wasn't screaming because I had been trained not to. I had been trained that my pain was an inconvenience to my husband. If I complained, I was nagging. If I got hurt, I was clumsy. If I was sick, I was seeking attention. Then there was the flu of 2005. Not a cold. The real knock-you-down influenza. I had a fever of 103. My bones felt like they were dissolving. I was curled up on the bathroom floor, resting my head against the cool porcelain of the tub. Jeffrey came in. He didn't bring me water. He didn't bring me a blanket. He stood in the doorway and said, "Vicky, the guys are coming for poker in 2 hours. You haven't made the chili yet." I looked at him through fever-glazed eyes. "Jeffrey, I'm sick. I think I need to go to urgent care." He scoffed. "It's just a bug. Take some Tylenol and power through. You know, Dave is coming from out of town. I can't host a poker night with an empty table. Just get the chili in the slow cooker, and you can go back to bed." So I did. I dragged myself to the kitchen, shivering so violently I nearly dropped the knife while chopping onions. I browned the meat while holding onto the counter for balance. I served his friends beers while sweating through my clothes, dizzy and nauseous. And when I finally collapsed into bed, Jeffrey didn't check on me for 6 hours because he was on a winning streak. Why did I stay? That's the question everyone asks. Why does any woman stay? I stayed because I thought it was my job. We are the generation of stand by your man. We were raised to believe that marriage is hard work and that a woman's role is to be the shock absorber for the family. I absorbed his bad moods. I absorbed his family's insults. I absorbed the pain, so he wouldn't have to be inconvenienced. I managed everything. I raised 3 children practically on my own because Jeffrey was always tired from work. I handled the finances, stretching his paycheck to cover the mortgage and the college funds, while he spent money on golf clubs and gadgets we didn't need. And the irony? The bitter, twisted irony. I took care of Martha. 5 years ago, when Martha had her hip replacement, who was there? Not Jeffrey. He couldn't handle the medical stuff. It was me. I drove her to physical therapy 3 times a week. I cooked her meals, checking every single label to make sure it fit her low-sodium diet. I helped her to the bathroom. I washed her laundry. I sat by her bedside and listened to her complain about how slow her recovery was. I was gentle. I was kind. I treated her with the dignity she never once showed me. And while I was doing that, she was probably already planning the next joke at my expense. She was probably telling Brenda how slow I was, lying in that hospital bed, the machines beeping a steady rhythm. The realization hit me harder than the anaphylaxis. My patience hadn't been a virtue. It had been a permission slip. By staying silent when Jeffrey told me to walk on a broken bone, I taught him that my body didn't matter. By cooking chili while I had a fever, I taught him that my health was secondary to his entertainment. And by caring for a mother-in-law who despised me, I taught them all that I had no self-respect. They didn't put peanuts in my dinner because they made a mistake. They didn't even do it just because they were cruel. They did it because they knew there would be no consequences. They knew old Vicky would survive, make an excuse for them, and show up next Sunday with a smile. They thought I was weak. They mistook my loyalty for stupidity. I looked at the 4-line snake into my arm. My throat still felt sore, bruised from the inside out. But my mind was clearer than it had been in decades. Jeffrey was sitting in the chair in the corner of the hospital room. He was asleep, his head lolling back, his mouth slightly open. He looked peaceful. He wasn't worried. He knew that when I woke up, I would smooth this over. I would tell the doctor it was an accident. I would protect his mother. I watched him sleep for a long time. I looked at the gray hair, the soft hands that had never lifted a finger to help me when I was down. I looked at the man I had given my youth, my energy, and my heart to, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't feel love. I didn't even feel anger. I felt done. The nurse walked in to check my vitals. She smiled gently. "Oh, you're awake, Mrs. Johnson. How are you feeling?" I looked at Jeffrey, snoring softly in the corner. Then I looked back at the nurse. "I'm alive," I whispered, my voice raspy but steady. "And I'm finally awake." Jeffrey snorted in his sleep and shifted. He didn't wake up. He didn't know that the woman lying in the bed wasn't the same woman who had sat down at that dinner table. That woman had died on the floor with the taste of peanuts in her mouth. The woman who woke up was someone entirely different, and she was about to burn the whole house down. I kept my eyes closed. It is an old survival instinct I learned early in my marriage. Sometimes it is safer to play dead. Sometimes if you stay very still and quiet, you hear things people would never say to your face. The nurse had left the room a few minutes ago, leaving a lingering scent of antiseptic and rubbing alcohol. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and Jeffrey's shallow breathing from the chair in the corner. I was just about to open my eyes to ask him for a sip of water when the heavy door clicked open again. The footsteps were different this time. They were heavy, authoritative, rubber soles on linoleum, moving with purpose. "Mr. Johnson?" a deep voice asked. It wasn't the nurse. It was the doctor. I heard Jeffrey shift in the vinyl chair, the rustle of his jacket, the groan of the springs. He cleared his throat, that nervous little cough he does when he's dealing with authority figures. "Yes," Jeffrey said. He sounded groggy, irritated. "Is she ready to go? We've been here for hours." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to stay even. I lay perfectly still, my hands resting limp on the scratchy hospital sheet. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Dr. Evans," the voice said. It was cold, hard. "I'm the attending physician in the ER tonight. We need to talk about what happened to your wife." "She had a reaction," Jeffrey said, his tone dismissive. "She has allergies. She probably just caught a whiff of something. She gets very anxious about it. You know, sometimes she works herself up into a state." There was a silence, a long, heavy silence that filled the room like smoke. I could feel the doctor staring at him. I could feel the judgment radiating off him. This was not anxiety, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Evans said. His voice was dangerously low. Your wife was brought in with full anaphylactic shock. Her airway was 90% closed. Her blood pressure had bottomed out. She was hypoxic. That means her brain wasn't getting enough oxygen. I heard the rustle of papers, a clipboard being snapped shut. If the paramedics had arrived 5 minutes later, Dr. Evans continued, enunciating every word, we wouldn't be having a conversation. You would be filling out a death certificate. I waited. I waited for Jeffrey to gasp. I waited for him to ask, is she going to be okay? I waited for the sound of regret. Instead, I heard a sigh, a loud, exasperated exhalation of breath. Okay, look, Jeffrey said. I get it. It was serious. But she's stable now, right? The swelling is down. She is stable, the doctor replied, and I could hear the disbelief in his tone. But we need to keep her for observation. And I need to ask you something directly. The paramedics noted that there were people laughing at the scene. They noted that the patient claimed there were peanuts in her food intentionally. My stomach twisted. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, terrified that my eyelids would flutter and give me away. It was a misunderstanding, Jeffrey said quickly, too quickly. My mother, she's old. She forgets things. It was a prank that went a little wrong. Just a family joke. You know how families are. A prank. Dr. Evans repeated, Mr. Johnson, administering a known allergen to someone with a severe history isn't a prank. In the eyes of the law, that is assault. If she had died, it would be manslaughter. Keep your voice down, Jeffrey hissed. She's sleeping. Look, nobody is pressing charges. It's a family matter. We just need to get her home. My mother is a wreck. She's back at the house crying because she thinks she ruined the dinner party. I need to get Vicky out of here so I can go smooth things over. I felt cold, ice cold. It started in my chest and spread all the way to my fingertips. He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't worried that he almost became a widower tonight. He was worried about the dinner party. He was worried that his mother was upset. He was worried that my near-death experience was an inconvenience to his Sunday schedule. I heard the distinct sound of a wrist turning, the fabric of a sleeve sliding against skin. He was checking his watch. It's already past 9. Jeffrey muttered, more to himself than the doctor. If we leave now, I can still catch the end of the game and calm Mom down. Mr. Johnson, the doctor said, and his voice was icy now. Your wife is staying here tonight. Her throat could swell again. It's called a biphasic reaction. If you want to leave, you can leave. But she stays. Fine, Jeffrey snapped. Fine. But tell her I had to go. Tell her, just tell her I'll pick her up in the morning. And don't fill her head with that assault nonsense. She's dramatic enough as it is. I heard the chair scrape against the floor as Jeffrey stood up. I heard his heavy footsteps walking toward the door. He didn't come to the bedside. He didn't kiss my forehead. He didn't touch my hand. He just walked out. The door clicked shut, and the room fell silent again. Dr. Evans let out a breath. I heard him step closer to the bed. He stood there for a moment, just watching me. Then he turned and walked out softly, leaving me alone. I opened my eyes. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the monitor screens. I stared at the empty chair where Jeffrey had been sitting. You know, people talk about heartbreak like it's a sudden explosion. They talk about screaming and throwing plates. They talk about the searing pain of betrayal. But lying there, hooked up to an 4 drip, I didn't feel an explosion. I felt a death. It was quiet. It was the death of the woman I used to be, the Vicky who made excuses, the Vicky who thought, deep down, he loves me, he's just not good at showing it. That Vicky died the moment he checked his watch. I realized then that I wasn't married to a husband. I was married to a stranger. I had been sleeping next to a man for 40 years who looked at my potential death and saw it as a scheduling conflict. He saw my suffocation as an embarrassment to his mother. I looked at the hand on the bedsheet. My hand, it looked old. The skin was thin, spotting with age. I saw the gold wedding band on my finger. It had been there since 1984. It felt heavy. It felt like a shackle. I didn't cry. I think I had cried enough tears over Jeffrey Johnson to fill the Pacific Ocean. And I was dry. I was empty. But in that emptiness, something else started to grow. It was a cold, hard resolve. He said I was dramatic. He said I was an inconvenience. He said he needed to go home to smooth things over with the woman who tried to kill me. Okay, Jeffrey, I whispered to the empty room. My voice was a croak, raw and broken. You want to play games? You want to talk about pranks? I reached up and touched the bandage on my arm. The doctor was right. The old Vicky would have gone home tomorrow and apologized for ruining the night. The old Vicky would have eaten crow just to keep the peace. But the stranger he just left in this hospital room, she wasn't going to apologize. I stared at the empty chair, and for the first time in my life, I didn't wish he was there. I was glad he was gone, because now I could think, and I had a lot of thinking to do. I closed my eyes again, but not to sleep. I started to plan, and this time, nobody was going to be laughing when I was finished. The morning sun was hitting the dashboard as Jeffrey drove us home from the hospital. It should have been a beautiful morning. The sky was that crisp, bright blue you only see after a storm. But inside the car, the air was thick enough to choke on. My throat still felt scratchy, like I had swallowed a handful of sand. My body felt heavy, drained of every ounce of energy. I sat there, clutching my purse in my lap, waiting. I was waiting for him to speak. I was waiting for the apology. In my head, I had already written the script for him. I imagined he would reach over, take my hand, and say, "Vicky, I am so sorry. I should have stood up for you. My mother went too far." I stared at his hands on the steering wheel. I watched his jaw clench and unclench. We turned onto our street, passing the houses of neighbors we had known for 30 years. He pulled into the driveway and put the car in park. He didn't turn off the engine. He just sat there, staring straight ahead at the garage door. "Well," he finally said. I looked at him. "Well." He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes wasn't regret. It was anger. Pure, simmering annoyance. "Are you happy now?" he asked. I blinked, confused. My brain was still foggy from the medication. "Am I happy?" "Jeffrey, I just spent the night in the emergency room." "Yeah, I know," he snapped, hitting the steering wheel with the palm of his hand. "And now I have to deal with the fallout. Do you have any idea how upset my mother is?" I felt my mouth drop open. "Your mother? Your mother is upset." "Yes, Vicky. She's 82 years old. She called me 3 times while you were sleeping. She's hysterical. She thinks you did this on purpose to make her look bad, in front of the family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She put peanuts in my food, Jeffrey. She admitted it. She laughed about it." "It was a sprinkle," he shouted. "A tiny sprinkle. It wasn't enough to kill a fly. The doctor said you were in shock, but I know you. I've lived with you for 40 years. You panic. You feel a little tingle, and your brain goes into overdrive. You mentally made yourself sick just to prove a point, didn't you?" He was looking at me with such disgust, as if I was the villain, as if I was the one who had ruined the family gathering. "You think I stopped breathing on purpose?" I whispered. "You think I made my throat close up?" "I think you love the drama," he spat. "I think you love being the victim. And now, because of your little performance, my mother is sitting at home crying. She made that dinner for us. She tried to do something nice, and you threw it back in her face. He unbuckled his seatbelt aggressively. Get out of the car, Vicky. I can't look at you right now. I opened the door. My legs were shaking as I stepped onto the driveway. I felt dizzy. I needed help walking up the steps, but Jeffrey was already marching toward the front door. He unlocked it, pushed it open, and didn't hold it for me. The door slammed shut in my face. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of my own front door. I had to use my key to let myself in. When I walked into the kitchen, Jeffrey was already on the phone. His voice had changed completely. It was soft, soothing, gentle. I know, Mom. I know, he was saying into the receiver. She's home. No, she's not talking about it. Don't cry, Mom. Please. You know how she is. She's just difficult. He looked up and saw me standing there. He didn't hang up. He didn't lower his voice. He turned his back to me. I'm coming over, he said to her. Yeah, I'll bring some donuts. We can talk. I'm not going to let her ruin your Sunday. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up the phone and grabbed his car keys off the counter. Where are you going? I asked. My voice sounded small in the big, empty kitchen. I'm going to my mother's, he said, not making eye contact. She needs me. Someone has to apologize to her for the mess you made last night. You're leaving me? I asked. I just got out of the hospital. I can barely stand up. You're fine, Vicky, he said, walking past me toward the garage door. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Get some rest. Try to think about someone other than yourself, for once. And then he was gone. The silence of the house settled around me like a heavy blanket. I heard the garage door open, the car back out, and the sound of the engine fading down the street. I was alone. I walked over to the kitchen table and sat down. My legs finally gave out. I looked around the room. This kitchen, I had designed it. I had picked out the yellow tile backsplash because Jeffrey said he liked bright colors. I had chosen the heavy oak table because it was sturdy enough for the grandchildren we hoped to have. I looked at the refrigerator. It was covered in photos, held up by magnets I had collected from our travels. I stood up slowly and walked over to it. I really looked at them. There was a photo of us at our nephew's wedding 3 years ago. I was smiling, holding Jeffrey's arm. He was looking away, checking his phone. There was a picture from Christmas. I was in the background, wearing an apron, holding a tray of cookies. Jeffrey was in the recliner, laughing with his brother. I looked at picture after picture, and I saw a pattern I had been blind to for decades. I wasn't in these photos as a participant. I was in the background. I was the one serving the food. I was the one holding the coats. I was the one organizing the group shots, but rarely being asked to be in them. I wasn't his wife. I was his staff. I was the maid who kept his house clean. I was the cook who made sure his cholesterol stayed down. I was the banker who made sure the bills were paid on time. So his credit score remained perfect. And I was the nurse who took care of his parents, so he didn't have to deal with the messy parts of aging. He didn't love me. He loved the service I provided. He loved that I made his life easy. And the moment I became difficult, the moment I became a human being with a medical emergency, he discarded me. He had gone to comfort the woman who tried to hurt me. He was probably sitting in her kitchen, right now, eating a donut, nodding while she complained about me. They were probably laughing again. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I reached up and wiped it away. It was cold. No, I said aloud. I grabbed a paper towel and wiped my face hard. I was done crying. Crying was for women who had hope. Crying was for women who thought their husbands might change. I didn't have hope anymore. I had something better. I had clarity. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Next Sunday was circled in red. Family dinner. It said in my handwriting. I walked over to the calendar. I didn't cross it out. I stared at it. Jeffrey thought I was weak. He thought I was difficult. He thought he could gaslight me into believing that my closing throat was a figment of my imagination. I pulled a chair out and sat down. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud. If he wanted to treat me like an employee, then maybe it was time for me to resign. But you don't just walk out of a job you've held for 40 years without severance pay. You don't leave without settling the accounts. I looked at the phone sitting on the counter. The screen was dark. I didn't call my sister to cry. I didn't call my best friend to vent. I sat there and I started to count. I counted the savings accounts. I counted the years. I counted every single time I had swallowed my pride to keep Jeffrey Johnson comfortable. He wanted me to think about someone other than myself. Okay, Jeffrey, I whispered. I'll think about you. I'll think about exactly what you owe me. I stood up and walked to the window. I watched a squirrel run across the fence. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm before a storm. Let him comfort his mother. Let them eat their donuts. Because when he came back, he wouldn't find the wife who begged for forgiveness. He would find a woman who was done being the victim. I turned away from the window and walked to the bedroom to find my bank ledger. It was time to get to work. For the next 2 weeks, I became an actress. I think a lot of women my age are excellent actresses. We learn how to smile when we are exhausted. We learn how to nod when we are bored. And we learn how to pretend everything is fine when our world is falling apart. I cooked Jeffrey's eggs exactly the way he liked them. Over easy, not too runny. I ironed his shirts. I asked him about his golf game. I moved through the house like a ghost, quiet and efficient. Jeffrey seemed relieved. He thought he had won. In his mind, my silence meant I had accepted his version of events. He thought I had accepted that I was dramatic and that his mother was a saint. He started whistling again in the mornings. He slapped my rear and when he walked past me in the kitchen, a gesture that used to make me feel seen, but now made my skin crawl. Glad to see you're back to normal, Vic, he said one Tuesday, biting into his toast. I knew you just needed a few days to get over it. I didn't say anything. I just poured him more coffee. Normal, I thought. If only he knew. The breaking point didn't come with a shout. It came with a ding. It was a Saturday afternoon. Jeffrey was out washing the car in the driveway. He takes great pride in that Buick. He spends more time polishing the chrome than he spends talking to his grandchildren. He had left his iPad on the kitchen island. He usually takes it with him everywhere, guarding it like it contains nuclear codes. But today he was careless. He was comfortable. He thought his wife was back in her box. I was wiping down the counters when the screen lit up. Ding. A message banner appeared across the lock screen. It was from a group chat titled Johnson Family Circus. The message was from Martha. It read, "Did you ask her yet?" I stopped wiping. My hand hovered over the cool glass of the screen. I knew I shouldn't look. My mother raised me to respect privacy. She told me that a wife who snoops is a wife looking for trouble. But I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a woman who had almost been killed by a peanut sauce. I pressed the home button. Jeffrey doesn't use a passcode. He says it's too much hassle to type in 4 numbers. He assumes no one in his house would dare touch his things. The screen unlocked, opening right into the message thread. I felt my heart start to pound, a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. I scrolled up. The messages went back 2 weeks, right back to the night of the hospital. Brenda, sister-in-law, OMG, is she dead? Or just dramatic? LOL. Jeffrey, she's fine. Doctor kept her overnight. Total overkill. Martha, I told you she was faking. Did you see the way she grabbed her throat? It was like a bad soap opera. I bet she practiced that in the mirror. Jeffrey, I know, Mom. It was embarrassing. The doctor lectured me like I was a criminal. I read that line 3 times. It was embarrassing. Not terrifying. Not tragic. Embarrassing. I kept scrolling, my fingers trembling slightly. Brenda. So, is she going to sue us? She seems the type. Jeffrey, no. I handled it. She's quiet now. She knows not to push me. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with allergies. She knows not to push me. As if I were a dog he had successfully trained. Then, I saw the messages from today. Martha, well, Sunday dinner is coming up. Is she coming? Or is she going to pout in her room? Brenda, maybe we should serve shellfish this time. See if she swells up like a balloon again. Ha ha. Martha, invite her. I'm making that chocolate cake she hates. The dense one. Let's see if she fakes a migraine this time to get out of eating it. I want to see her face when we bring it out. I stared at the words. They weren't just mean. They were sadistic. They were planning to bait me. They wanted to watch me squirm. They viewed my pain as their Sunday afternoon entertainment. And then I saw Jeffrey's reply. The typing bubble appeared. And then the text landed on the screen just moments before I had walked over. Jeffrey, I'll make sure she comes. Don't worry, Mom. She does what I say. The air left my lungs. She does what I say. It wasn't a partnership. It wasn't a marriage. It was ownership. To him, I wasn't Vicky, the woman who had held his hand when his father died. I wasn't Vicky, the mother of his children. I was an object. I was something he owned, something he controlled, something he could deliver to his mother to be mocked. I looked out the kitchen window. I could see Jeffrey outside, whistling as he sprayed down the tires of the Buick. He looked so happy. He looked like a man without a care in the world. And why shouldn't he be? He had his clean house, his obedient wife, and his mother's approval. A fire started in my belly. It wasn't the hot, flashing anger of a fight. It was the cold, blue flame of absolute clarity. I looked back at the iPad. Martha had sent one last message. Good. 6 p.m. Don't be late. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The old Vicky would have put the iPad down. She would have gone to her room and cried. She would have waited for Jeffrey to come inside and then begged him not to make her go. She would have pleaded with him to defend her, but the old Vicky was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the iPad across the room. I stood up straighter. I took a deep breath. Inhaling the smell of the lemon polish I kept this prison clean with. I started to type. I didn't sign it as Vicky. I replied as Jeffrey. Me, as Jeffrey will be there. Can't wait. I hit send. I watched the message turn blue. Deliver status. Read. I pressed the home button and set the iPad back down on the counter, exactly where he had left it. I adjusted it slightly so the angle was perfect, just in case he noticed. My hands weren't shaking anymore. She does what I say, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I walked over to the refrigerator and took out the chicken I had planned to defrost for dinner. I looked at it. Then I threw it in the trash. I wasn't cooking tonight. Jeffrey wanted me to go to that dinner. Fine. I would go. And I would play my part. But he had no idea that the script had changed. He thought he was bringing a sheep to the slaughter, just like always. He didn't know he was bringing a wolf. I heard the back door open. Jeffrey walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. "Car looks great," he said, beaming. "Did anyone call?" I turned to him. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a smile. It was the best acting performance of my life. "No, dear," I said softly. No one called. But are we still on for dinner at your mother's on Sunday? I was thinking I should make a dessert. Jeffrey looked surprised, then smug. He puffed out his chest a little. He thought his discipline was working. Yeah, he said, tossing the rag into the laundry bin. We're on. That sounds good. Vic, make something nice. Make an effort. Oh, I will, I said, my voice sweet as poison. I'm going to make a huge effort, Jeffrey. You won't believe the effort I'm going to make. He nodded, satisfied, and walked into the living room to turn on the TV. I stood there, listening to the canned laughter from the television. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Sunday was 5 days away. 5 days to plan. 5 days to prepare. And, most importantly, 5 days to visit the bank. Because if I was going to do what he said, I was going to make sure I got paid for it. I turned off the kitchen lights, leaving the room in shadows. The plan was set, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't afraid of Sunday dinner. I couldn't wait. Friday morning arrived with a gray, heavy sky. It matched exactly how I felt inside. Jeffrey had left early for his weekly tea time. He kissed me on the cheek before he walked out the door, whistling. He was in a good mood because he thought Sunday was going to be a victory lap. He thought I was going to walk into his mother's house, eat my humble pie, and go back to being the silent, convenient wife I had always been. I waited until I saw his Buick turn the corner at the end of the block. Then I moved. I didn't dress up. I put on my comfortable shoes and my raincoat. I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking so bad, I dropped my keys twice before I could unlock my car door. I wasn't going to the grocery store. I wasn't going to the pharmacy. I was going to the bank. The drive was only 10 minutes, but it felt like 10 hours. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I expected to see Jeffrey behind me. I expected him to know. I felt like a criminal, and maybe in some people's eyes, I was about to become one. I parked the car in the back of the lot, away from the main road. I sat there with the engine running, staring at the brick building. This bank held our life. It held 40 years of paychecks, tax returns, and Christmas bonuses. I knew exactly what was in there because I was the one who put it there. Jeffrey earned the money, yes, but I was the one who saved it. I was the one who clipped coupons every Sunday for 3 decades. I was the one who mended his work pants instead of buying new ones. I was the one who said no to vacations so we could build a safety net. We had a joint savings account with $90,000 in it. It was supposed to be for our golden years, but mostly it was for Jeffrey. He had it earmarked. He wanted a fishing boat. He wanted to renovate the sunroom so he could watch his sports games in peace. He talked about that boat like it was his child. I turned off the car. The silence in the cabin was deafening. You can't do this. A voice in my head whispered, "It's dishonest. It's stealing. You are a good Christian woman. Vicky, you don't take things that aren't yours." I gripped the steering wheel. I thought about the boat. Then I thought about the peanuts. I thought about the sound of them laughing while I gasped for air. I thought about Jeffrey checking his watch while the doctor told him I could have died if I left him on Sunday, and I was going to leave him. What would happen on Monday? I knew Jeffrey. The moment I walked out that door, he would turn nasty. He would cancel the credit cards. He would freeze the accounts. He would tell everyone I was crazy and try to leave me with nothing. I would be a 68-year-old woman with no job, no home, and no money to pay for a lawyer. He would starve me out. He would force me to come crawling back just to survive. I wasn't going to let that happen. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cold wind. I walked into the bank with my head held high. The lobby was quiet. Nancy, the head teller, smiled when she saw me. We have known each other for 15 years. We talk about our grandkids. She thinks I am the sweetest lady in town. Good morning, Mrs. Johnson, she chirped. How are you today? I'm doing well, Nancy. I lied. My voice didn't shake. I need to make a withdrawal. A somewhat large one. Of course, she said, pulling up my account on her screen. What are we looking at? Need some cash for a trip. I took a breath. No, I need a cashier's check, and I need to open a new account. In my name only. Nancy paused. She looked up at me, her smile faltering just a little. She saw something in my eyes. Maybe she saw the bruises under them from lack of sleep. Maybe she saw the determination. Okay, she said slowly. How much would you like to transfer? $45,000, I said. Nancy's eyebrows shot up. 45? From the joint savings? Yes, that is exactly half, I said firmly. And I also want to close out the emergency fund CD. That's another $15,000. Put that in the new account, too. Nancy typed on her keyboard. The clicking sound echoed in the quiet lobby. Mrs. Johnson, that's a significant amount. Does Mr. Johnson know you're moving these funds? Usually for this amount, we like to have both parties. It's a joint account, Nancy. I interrupted her. My name is on it. I have full signatory rights. I don't need his permission to access my own money. Is that correct? She hesitated. She looked at the screen, then back at me. Technically, yes, you are right. You can withdraw it. Then do it, please. She started processing the transaction. I stood there, watching the numbers on the little screen. $45,000, plus $15,000, $60,000 total. I knew what people would say when they found out. They would say I was a thief. They would say I was vindictive. They would say, Vicky, you should have waited for the divorce settlement. You should have let the lawyers handle it. But lawyers take months. Hunger happens in hours. I thought about the last 40 years. I thought about the cleaning. I cleaned a 4-bedroom house by myself every week. If we had hired a maid, that would have cost $200 a week. For 40 years, that's over $400,000. I thought about the cooking, a personal chef, expensive. I thought about the nursing. When Jeffrey's father had dementia, who bathed him? Who changed his sheets? It wasn't Jeffrey. It was me. Private nursing care costs thousands a month. I did it for free. I wasn't stealing. This was back pay. This was severance. I was being fired from my position as wife, and I was making sure I walked away with my pension. Here you go, Mrs. Johnson, Nancy said. She slid a folder across the counter. Inside was the paperwork for the new account. The transfer is complete. The funds are in your private account. Mr. Johnson will see the withdrawal next time he checks the balance, or if he gets alert notifications. He doesn't check, I said, and he turned off notifications because they annoyed him during his golf swing. All right then, Nancy said. She lowered her voice. Vicky, take care of yourself. She knew. She didn't know the details, but she knew a woman making an escape plan when she saw one. Thank you, Nancy, I said. I walked out of the bank. The wind hit my face, but this time it felt good. It felt like fresh air. I got back into my car and locked the doors. I looked at the folder in the passenger seat. $60,000. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't enough to live in luxury for the rest of my life. But it was enough to buy a small condo. It was enough to buy groceries. It was enough to pay for a lawyer who could fight Jeffrey for the rest of what I was owed. I put the car in reverse. Some of you reading this are probably shaking your heads. You're thinking 2 wrongs don't make a right. You're thinking I should have been the better person. But let me ask you this. Can you eat being the better person? Can being the better person pay for a roof over your head when your husband locks you out? I drove home slowly. I pulled into the garage and parked next to Jeffrey's empty spot. I walked into the house, his house, and I hid the bank folder in the bottom of my knitting bag. I went into the kitchen and started chopping vegetables for dinner. When Jeffrey came home 4 hours later, sunburnt and happy from his golf game, he gave me a quick peck on the cheek. "Hey, hon," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Great game today." I was thinking, maybe next month we finally go look at some boats. I saw a catalog in the pro shop. I kept chopping carrots. The knife hit the cutting board with a steady, rhythmic thud, thud, thud. "That sounds nice, Jeffrey," I said. "We can certainly look." He didn't know that his boat was gone. He didn't know that his sunroom was gone. He didn't know that the money he thought was his power was now sitting in my knitting bag, ready to be my freedom. I felt a twinge of guilt, sharp and sudden. But then I remembered the peanuts. I remembered the laughter. And I kept chopping. I had the money. I had the plan. Now, all I had to do was survive Sunday dinner. Sunday was 48 hours away, and I was ready to serve the main course. Sunday arrived with the kind of clear, sharp sunshine that makes everything look exposed. I spent the morning getting ready, but not the way I usually do. For 40 years, I dressed to blend in. I wore beige, cream, and soft pastels, colors that said, "I am here to serve, not to be seen." Today, I put on a navy blue dress. It was tailored, sharp, and structured. I put on the pearl necklace my father gave me before he passed away, the one Jeffrey always said was too flashy for family dinners. I put on lipstick, not the pale pink I usually wore, but a deep, confident berry shade. When I walked out into the hallway, Jeffrey stopped dead in his tracks. He was fixing his tie in the mirror. He looked me up and down, frowning. "You look different," he said. "Are you sure that's appropriate for a casual Sunday dinner? You look like you're going to a board meeting." I felt like dressing up. I said simply, "Is there a rule against looking nice for your mother?" He narrowed his eyes but didn't push it. He checked his watch. "Just don't make a big deal out of anything tonight, Vicky. Remember what we talked about. Smile. Eat the cake. Let's just get through this." "Oh, don't worry, Jeffrey," I said, picking up my purse and a thick manila folder I had left on the hall table. "I intend to get through it, once and for all." He didn't ask about the folder. He probably assumed it was recipes or photos of the grandkids. He didn't know it was a demolition order for his life. The drive to Martha's house was quiet. My heart was beating a steady rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. We pulled into the driveway. Brenda's car was already there. I could see them moving around in the kitchen window. We walked to the door. Jeffrey opened it without knocking, walking in like the king of the castle. "We're here," he announced. The chatter in the kitchen stopped. Martha, Brenda, and Jeffrey's brother, Mike, all turned to look. They were smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a pack of wolves watching a limping deer enter the clearing. "Well, look who survived," Brenda said, leaning against the counter with a glass of wine. "We were taking bets on whether you'd show up, Vicky. I guess you decided to brave the scary food." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. She looked me over, her eyes lingering on my dress. "You're overdressed," she muttered, "but at least you're here. Sit down. Dinner is ready." I walked to the table. They had set my place right in the middle, where everyone could see me. It felt like a stage. Dinner was a tense affair. They served roast beef. Every time I took a bite, the table went silent. They were watching me chew. They were waiting for me to choke. "Is the beef okay, Vicky?" Mike asked, grinning. "No secret ingredients? Or are you going to faint again?" "It's delicious, Mike," I said calmly. I cut another piece and ate it. "Thank you for asking." My calmness was throwing them off. They wanted me to be nervous. They wanted me to ask about the ingredients. They wanted me to be the crazy, dramatic wife. But I just dabbed my mouth with my napkin, and smiled. Jeffrey relaxed. He was eating heartily, thinking his discipline had worked. He thought I was playing nice. He thought I had learned my place. Finally, the plates were cleared. Time for dessert. Martha announced triumphantly. She went to the kitchen and came back with a massive, dense chocolate cake. It was a flourless torte, heavy, rich, and something she knew I detested because it always gave me a migraine. "I made this just for you, Vicky," Martha said, placing it in the center of the table. "I know how much you love chocolate. And don't worry, no nuts." The table snickered. "Go on," Brenda said. "Have a big slice. Unless you're allergic to chocolate now too." Jeffrey nudged me under the table. "Eat the cake, Vic," he hissed under his breath. I looked at the cake. Then I looked at Martha. Then I looked at Jeffrey. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and ringing in the dining room, "I brought dessert too." The room went quiet. Jeffrey looked confused. "You didn't cook anything." I saw the kitchen. "I didn't cook it," I said. I reached down and picked up the manila folder from where I had rested it against my chair leg. "But I think everyone will find it very filling." I placed the folder in the center of the table, right next to the chocolate cake. "What is this?" Martha asked, looking at the folder like it was a dead rat. "Open it," I said. Martha hesitated. She looked at Jeffrey. Jeffrey shrugged, looking annoyed. "Just open it, Mom. It's probably pictures of the kids." Martha reached out with her arthritic hand and flipped the folder open. The first thing she saw was the printout of the group chat. I had enlarged the text so she wouldn't need her reading glasses. "Invite her. I'm making that chocolate cake she hates. Let's see if she fakes a migraine this time." Martha went pale. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Keep reading," I said softly. Brenda leaned over and snatched the paper. "What is this? You were spying on us." I was reading a notification on my husband's iPad. I corrected her. "Read the next page, Brenda." She flipped the page. It was Jeffrey's text. "I'll make sure she comes. Don't worry, Mom. She does what I say." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Jeffrey stopped chewing. He stared at the paper in his sister's hand. His face turned a splotchy red. "You went through my messages?" Jeffrey demanded, his voice rising. "How dare you? That is an invasion of privacy." "An invasion of privacy?" I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. "Jeffrey, your mother poisoned my dinner 2 weeks ago. You sat there and watched me suffocate, and then you texted them that I was a trained dog who does what she's told. It was a joke." Mike yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "God, you have no sense of humor." "I don't find my death funny," I said, "and neither did the hospital." I reached over and flipped to the next document in the pile. It was the hospital bill. $5,000, I said, pointing to the total. "That is the cost of your joke, Martha. The ambulance, the epinephrine, the overnight stay. $5,000 because you wanted to prove a point." "So what?" Martha spat, regaining her composure. "Jeffrey will pay it. He always pays for your drama." "Actually," I said, leaning forward, "he won't." I pulled out the final piece of paper. It was the transaction receipt from the bank. It showed a transfer of $60,000, $45,000 from savings, $15,000 from the emergency fund, leaving the joint account with a balance of exactly $0. I slid the paper across the table toward Jeffrey. "What is this?" Jeffrey asked, squinting at the numbers. "Look at the balance, Jeffrey," I said. He looked. His eyes widened. He grabbed the paper, bringing it closer to his face. "Zero? What? Where is the money? Vicky, where is the money?" "It's in an account you can't touch," I said. "You stole my money," he screamed, standing up so fast his chair tipped over backward. You stole my boat money. You thief. I didn't steal anything, I said, staying seated. I felt powerful. I felt like a giant among children. I took exactly half, plus the emergency fund. Because this is an emergency, Jeffrey. I am leaving you. The room erupted. Brenda was screaming that I was a criminal. Martha was clutching her chest, pretending to have a heart attack. Jeffrey was purple with rage. You can't do this. Jeffrey shouted, leaning over the table, his spit landing on the chocolate cake. You are my wife. That money belongs to this family. You put it back right now, or I swear to God. Or you'll what? I interrupted him. You'll ignore me while I die. You've already done that. I stood up. I smoothed down the front of my navy blue dress. I picked up my purse. I spent 40 years cooking your meals, Jeffrey. I said, I spent 40 years cleaning your toilet. I spent 40 years nursing your father and driving your mother to her appointments. If you hire a professional for all those services, the bill comes out to a lot more than $60,000. Consider it a discount. You walk out that door, and you don't come back. Martha screeched, Jeffrey, tell her she's cut off. I looked at Jeffrey. He was shaking. He looked terrified, not because he was losing his wife, but because he was losing his manager. He was realizing that tomorrow morning there would be no coffee. There would be no clean shirts. There would be no one to organize his pills. Vicky, he stammered, his voice dropping from a scream to a desperate plea. Vicky, stop. You can't just leave. Who is going to handle the bills? Who is going to take care of the house? I looked him dead in the eye. I looked at the man I had wasted a lifetime on. Jeffrey, I said, delivering the line I had practiced in the mirror for 3 days. You said I do what you say. Well, I'm saying I'm done. I've taken my half of the savings. You can ask your mother to pay for the divorce lawyer. I turned my back on them. Vicky, Jeffrey shouted. Vicky, come back here. I walked to the front door. I could hear them arguing behind me. I heard Martha blaming Jeffrey. I heard Jeffrey blaming Brenda. I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. It was cool and crisp. I walked to my car, which, thank goodness, was in my name, and got in. My hands were shaking now, but it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. It was the shaking you feel when you step off a roller coaster. I started the engine. I didn't look back at the house. I put the car in gear and drove away. I had no husband. I had no home to go back to tonight. But I had $60,000, a full tank of gas, and for the first time in 40 years, I could breathe. The sound in that dining room wasn't just noise. It was a physical force. It felt like the air pressure had dropped and the windows were about to blow out. Martha was the first to find her voice. It started as a low growl and ended in a shriek that I will remember for the rest of my life. You thief, she screamed, her face turning a dangerous shade of purple. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Jeffrey, call the police. Call them right now. She can't take that money. That is family money. Brenda was standing up now, spilling her wine all over the white tablecloth. I knew it, she yelled, pointing a manicured finger at me. I told you she was a gold digger. I told you she was plotting something. Who takes half a savings account? A partner, I said calmly, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. A partner takes her share. Jeffrey wasn't screaming yet. He was still in the first stage of grief, denial. He was staring at that bank receipt like it was written in a foreign language. He kept blinking, as if he could make the numbers change if he just wished hard enough. Zero, he whispered. It says zero. The boat fund, the renovation, it's all zero. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wide and wet. For a second, he looked like a little boy who had dropped his ice cream cone. But then, The shock turned into panic. Real, genuine panic. "Vicky," he said, his voice trembling. "You have to put it back. You have to transfer it back, right now. This isn't funny anymore. The joke is over." "You're right, Jeffrey," I said, clutching my purse tighter. "The joke is over. That's exactly what I'm telling you." I turned around. I couldn't look at them anymore. The sight of Martha's hate-filled face and Jeffrey's pathetic confusion was making me sick. I needed air. I needed to get out of that house before I suffocated, for real this time. I started walking toward the front door. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, 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 a steady rhythm of departure. "Don't you turn your back on me." Martha screeched. "Jeffrey, stop her. Don't let her walk out with that checkbook." I heard a chair scrape violently against the floor. Heavy footsteps pounded behind me. I reached the front door and grabbed the brass handle. It was cold under my palm. I turned it, ready to step into freedom, but a hand clamped down on my arm. It was Jeffrey. His grip was tight, desperate. He spun me around to face him. He was breathing hard, smelling of roast beef and red wine. "You can't do this," he panted, his eyes darting around the hallway as if looking for a solution. "Vicky, be reasonable. You're emotional. You're not thinking straight. You can't just leave. We have a life. We have a routine." I looked down at his hand gripping my arm. The knuckles were white. "I am thinking straighter than I have in 40 years. I said, "Let go of my arm, Jeffrey." He didn't let go. He tightened his grip. "No, you listen to me. Who is going to organize my pills?" he asked. The question hung in the air between us. He didn't ask who is going to love me. He didn't ask who is going to grow old with me. He asked about his medication. "My cholesterol pills, Vicky," he continued, his voice rising in hysteria. "The blue ones and the white ones. You sort them every Sunday night. I don't know the dosage. I don't know which pharmacy we use. And the bills, the property tax is due next month. I don't even know the password to the online banking. Who manages the bills if you leave?" I stared at him. I really looked at him. This man wasn't fighting for his wife. He was fighting for his unpaid administrative assistant. He was terrified that his comfortable, curated life was about to become inconvenient. He was worried he might have to learn how to be an adult at 68 years old. "And the laundry," he added, as if this was the winning argument. "I have a tea time on Tuesday. My lucky polo shirt. You haven't ironed it yet. You can't leave with the laundry basket full." It was so pathetic I almost laughed. But I didn't. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. Not for us, but for the woman I had been. I had made myself so small, so useful, that he didn't even see me as a person. He saw me as a utility. I was no different to him than the dishwasher or the lawnmower. And now that I was breaking down, he was just angry that he'd have to do the work himself. I looked at his hand on my arm one last time. "Jeffrey," I said, my voice low and dangerous. I yanked my arm back. I didn't do it gently. I ripped it out of his grip with a strength I didn't know I had. He stumbled back a step, surprised by the force of it. "You want to know who is going to sort your pills?" I asked. "You want to know who is going to iron your polo shirt and pay the property tax?" I pointed back toward the kitchen, where Martha was still shouting insults to anyone who would listen. "Ask your mother," I said. "She seems to know everything. She knows how to cook, she knows how to run a family, and she certainly knows how to ruin a marriage. Let her sort your pills. She wanted you all to herself. Well, congratulations, Jeffrey. She won. You're all hers." Jeffrey stood there, mouth open, stunned into silence. The reality was finally hitting him. He wasn't just losing a wife. He was gaining a roommate, his mother. I didn't wait for him to respond. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out onto the porch. The evening air hit me instantly. It was cool, crisp, and smelled of wet leaves and rain. It was the sweetest thing I had ever smelled. I walked down the steps. My legs felt strange, wobbly, like I was walking on a boat, but light. I felt weightless. The heavy burden of 40 years of walking on eggshells had just evaporated. I reached my car. I had packed the trunk 2 days ago. One suitcase of clothes, my jewelry box, my passport, and the knitting bag with the $60,000 in the new bank book. I got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. Jeffrey had come out onto the porch. He looked small standing there under the yellow porch light. He looked old. He took a step toward the car, raising his hand as if to wave or stop me. "Vicky," he called out. It sounded weak against the wind. I put the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. It was a sound of power. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't flip him off. I didn't scream. I just put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I saw Brenda appear in the doorway behind Jeffrey, holding a wine glass, looking angry. I saw Martha's silhouette in the window, watching. I shifted into drive. I pressed the gas pedal. As I drove down the street, passing the houses of people who thought we were the perfect couple, I started to shake. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the fear was setting in. I was 68 years old. I was homeless. I was single. Oh my God! I whispered to the empty car. What have I done? I gripped the steering wheel tight. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the streetlights. But I blinked them away. I wasn't crying because I missed him. I was crying because of the sheer magnitude of the change. It is terrifying to jump off a cliff, even if the ground you were standing on was on fire. I drove toward the highway. I didn't have a plan for next month. I didn't have a plan for next year. But I had a plan for tonight. There was a nice holiday in about 20 miles north. One with clean sheets and room service. I was going to check in. I was going to order a burger and fries. I was going to turn off my phone. And I was going to sleep in the middle of the bed. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The street where my husband's family lived was disappearing into the darkness behind me. Let them argue over the money. Let them scream. Let Jeffrey figure out his own pill schedule. I turned on the radio. A song was playing, something upbeat, something alive. I merged onto the highway, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I just drove, and as the city lights faded behind me, I realized something that made me smile through the fear. They thought the peanuts would kill me, but in the end, the peanuts were the thing that saved my life. Because without them, I would have stayed at that table forever. Now, the table was empty, and the road was wide open. It has been exactly 6 months since I backed my car out of that driveway. 6 months since I left the roast beef, the chocolate cake, and the husband who thought I was nothing more than a servant. People asked me if I was scared. Of course I was. The first night in that Holiday Inn, I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. But do you know what happened the next morning? I woke up, and I didn't have to iron anyone's shirt. I didn't have to sort anyone's pills. I went down to the lobby, ordered a coffee, and drank it while it was still hot. It was the best cup of coffee I have ever tasted. Today, my life looks very different. I am sitting on a park bench, unlacing my hiking boots. I joined a walking club for seniors 3 months ago. I thought I would be too old or too slow, but it turns out I have plenty of energy now that I'm not carrying the weight of a grown man on my back. I have lost 15 pounds, but not from stress, from moving, from laughing, from living. My skin has color in it again. My doctor says my blood pressure is lower than it has been in 20 years. Next to me is my new friend, Sarah. We met in the club. Last week, we went out for lunch. Before I could even open my mouth to speak to the waiter, Sarah held up a hand. "Excuse me," she said to the young man. "My friend here has a severe peanut allergy. Can you please double-check with the chef about the oil you use? We don't want any accidents." I almost cried right there at the table. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't call me dramatic. She protected me. That is what love actually looks like. It's not flashy. It's just safe. As for Jeffrey, I haven't seen him, but in a small town, news travels fast. My sister ran into him at the grocery store last week. She told me he looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled and stained. Apparently, he hasn't figured out how the iron works yet. He was buying a cart full of frozen dinners and instant noodles. He is still living in the big house, but from what I hear, it's not the castle he thought it was. Without me there to manage the maintenance, the lawn is overgrown. The gutters are full. And the inside. Well, let's just say Jeffrey isn't the type to scrub a toilet. But the real justice, the real poetic justice, Martha moved in. Apparently, since I wasn't there to drive her around anymore, she decided she needed to be closer to her beloved son. So now they are stuck together. Two miserable people under one roof. I heard they fight constantly. She complains about his cooking, and he complains about her nagging. He finally got what he wanted. He made his mother the priority. I hope they are very happy together. And no, he didn't get his boat. I used the $60,000 as a down payment on a small condo on the other side of town. It has a tiny kitchen, but it's mine. The deed has my name on it. Just my name. My lawyer tells me that Jeffrey is trying to contest the withdrawal in the divorce proceedings. He calls it theft. My lawyer calls it marital asset distribution. But honestly, even if the judge makes me pay back every cent, it was worth it. That money bought me my freedom. It bought me the courage to walk out the door. I look at the trees swaying in the wind. I used to think my life was over at 68. I thought I had missed my chance to be happy. But I realized something important. I didn't ruin Jeffrey's life. I didn't ruin Martha's life. All I did was stop holding them up. I stopped being the pillar they leaned on while they kicked my shins. And the moment I stepped away, they fell down all on their own. I took the money. I took the car. But most importantly, I took my dignity back. Some people in town still whisper. They say I should have been more patient. They say I should have left the cash and taken the high road. They say a good wife doesn't steal from her husband, no matter how cruel he is. But looking at the sunset, feeling the cool breeze on my face, I know I made the right choice. I saved my own life that night. I took the money and I took my life back. Some say I should have left the cash. What would you have done? What city are you listening from? And what time is it there? Write it in the comments. And if you'd like to help me keep sharing these emotional, thrilling stories every day, even a small donation makes a big difference. It truly helps keep the channel alive. For more life stories like this, you can explore the other videos on my channel and subscribe. On the screen, you'll see 2 new stories I'm sure you'll enjoy. Click one and start listening right away. With love,